to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet place to rest your mind and soften into sleep. Tonight, you'll drift into a dreamy tale of flower petals and hidden lantern light, and of a secret inn that appears only when the world is ready to be gentle with you. Rest, palms open or curled, fingers heavy. Rest, palms open or curled, fingers heavy and relaxed. If it helps, imagine the day behind you like a coat you can set on a hook by the door, something you don't need to wear in bed. Take a slow breath in, as if you're sipping warm tea. Let it fill your chest, your ribs, your belly, and then let the breath out softly, unhurried, as if you're blowing a feather across your own pillow. Again, breathe in and out. With each exhale, the space behind your eyes grows smoother, quieter, like a small lake at dusk. The thoughts that flit through your mind can come and go without needing to be caught. You don't have to solve anything now. You don't have to plan. You don't have to reach for anything at all. Imagine that you are standing at the edge of a peaceful evening. The air is cool but kind, and it carries faint notes of greenery and distant blossoms. Somewhere nearby, water moves over stones with a soft, steady sound. Above you, the sky holds the last pale glow of day and the first hint of night. As you listen, as you breathe, as you let your body sink into stillness, the world begins to blur at the edges, not in a worrying way, but in the way a candlelight softens a room, rounding every corner, making everything feel safe. And in that softness, a story begins. On to quiet the way a bowl holds water, on to quiet the way a bowl holds water, gathering it, keeping it, letting it become deep and clear. Mist often rested there in the early mornings, thin and silver as silk. In the afternoons tended to be mild, as if the sun had learned to shine without insisting. Even the wind was polite in that place, coming through with gentle fingers, stirring leaves only enough to make them whisper. In the center of the valley ran a narrow stream. It didn't rush. It didn't foam or complain. It simply wandered, weaving between stones, smoothed by time, carrying the faint scent of moss and cold earth. Along the banks grew wild flowers in relaxed clusters and tall grasses that bowed with every passing breeze, as though practicing quiet gratitude. By grass, sometimes revealed again near a byegrass, sometimes revealed again near a smooth stone or a bent birch tree. Travelers seldom used it, not because it was dangerous, but because it was easy to miss, and because most people preferred faster ways, straighter ways, louder ways. But now and then, someone who had grown tired of speed would find themselves near the valley, feeling a pull they couldn't quite explain. They might have called it chance or curiosity or the need for air that didn't taste like smoke. And if they followed that feeling without arguing with it, the path would show itself to them just enough, step by step, as though it wished to be discovered slowly. On an evening like that, when the sky was a soft, watercolor wash of lavender and pearl, a traveler arrived at the valley's edge. Her name was Mira. She had the kind of quiet presence that comes from listening more than speaking, from noticing the way shadows move on stone, from understanding that silence isn't emptiness but a place to rest. She wore a cloak the color of dried leaves and carried a satchel that looked well loved. Her boots were dusted with the day's walking, and her hair, dark and loosely tied, had begun to slip free in gentle strands around her face. Mira had been traveling for a long while, not with urgency, but with purpose that did not need to announce itself. She was not running from danger or chasing a treasure. She was simply following the long, slow curiosity that sometimes rises in the heart, like steam from a kettle, like the first scent of rain. High in the broad sky, she'd tasted cool high in the broad sky. She'd tasted cool water from a spring. She'd paused in patches of shade and let her thoughts settle. But as evening approached, she began to feel the tender weight of fatigue, the kind that asks for warmth and shelter, for stillness and something soothing. She looked for a village, a cottage, a farmhouse with a lantern in a window. There was none, only the valley ahead breathing in the twilight. Mira stood for a moment at the threshold where dry land softened into green, where the air changed from warm dust to cool grass. The stream's murmur found her ears, and with it came a scent so faint she might have imagined it. Petals crushed gently underfoot, and the sweet hush of blossoms resting in darkness. She followed the stream. The path came and went under her steps as if it were thinking about it. Sometimes it was clear, and sometimes it was only the memory of a path, a slight flattening in the grass. She did not worry. Her pace was unhurried. Each step felt like a small decision to continue being calm. As she walked, the valley deepened around her. The hills on either side grew higher, or perhaps she simply moved into the part of the land that liked to feel tucked away. The sky above narrowed into a long, quiet ribbon where the first stars appeared distant and steady. Then, as if the air itself had exhaled, Mira noticed petals. They were scattered along the path, pale and delicate, as though a flowering tree had sighed in its sleep. Some petals lay in little drifts beside stones. Others clung to blades of grass, catching the last of the twilight like tiny pieces of moonlight. She paused and crouched, lifting one petal between her fingers. It was cool and velvety, slightly curled at the edge. It carried a fragrance that was both sweet and clean, like the memory of a garden after rain. Mira looked up. There were no trees nearby that seemed to match the petals. Not close enough anyway. She couldn't see any blossoms hanging overhead, and yet the petals continued, scattered like breadcrumbs made of softness. A quiet thought moved through her mind, not in words exactly, but in feeling. follow. So she did. The petals led her along the stream, deeper into the valley's folds. The darkness grew richer, but not frightening, as though night here was simply another kind of blanket. In the distance, an owl called once, and then the sound faded, leaving space behind it. After some time, Mira saw a light. It was not the bright glare of a torch or a campfire. It was a warm, honey-colored glow, low to the ground, like lantern light behind a window. At first it seemed impossibly small, a single dot of warmth in the wide valley. But as she walked on, it grew, and the air began to carry new scents. Wood smoke, not sharp, but sweet. Bread, faint and inviting, and the unmistakable comfort of a place where someone had swept the floor. The petals thickened. They gathered in gentle swirls, as if the wind had arranged them with care. They clung to the edges of the path, and some floated slowly down from somewhere unseen, turning in the air like sleepy butterflies. Mira rounded a bend in the stream, and there it was, an inn. Not a grand inn with high towers and busy stables, but a small, welcoming building that looked as though it had always belonged to the valley. Its walls were made of dark wood that gleamed softly, as if it had been oiled and loved. The roof was steep and shingled, and the eaves were trimmed with carved patterns of leaves and curling vines. In front of the inn, a low stone bridge crossed the stream, and lanterns hung from hooks, each one glowing with steady amber light. Flower petals drifted through the air around the inn like gentle snowfall. They gathered in the corners of the porch, tucked into the grooves of the steps, and dotted the stone bridge in pale crescents. The petals did not seem to fall from any tree. They simply existed, as though the air itself had decided to bloom. Mira stood very still. The inn was quiet, but not empty. She could feel it. She could sense warmth inside, and the soft presence of someone who knew how to make a place feel safe. A small sign hung beside the door, swinging slightly. The letters upon it were carved with care, but the name was difficult to read, not because it was faded, but because it seemed to shift gently when she tried to focus on it, as if it preferred not to be pinned down. Mira stepped onto the porch. The wood beneath her boots creaked softly, a friendly sound like a sigh. She reached for the door handle. Before she could turn it, the door opened from the inside. A woman stood there holding a candle in a brass holder. The candle's flame was steady, and its light painted gold across her face. She looked neither young nor old, or perhaps she was both, the way a calm lake can look ancient and new at the same time. Her hair was the color of ash and moonlight, braided loosely over one shoulder. Her eyes were kind, and in them was a quiet amusement, as if she'd been expecting Mira and had already set aside a place for her, not out of obligation, but out of gentle pleasure. "Good evening," the woman said, her voice soft as wool. "You followed the petals?" Mira nodded, feeling the last of her travel weariness loosen in her chest, the way it does when you realize you've reached shelter. "Come in," the woman said. "You must be tired." Mira stepped inside, warmth wrapped around her at once. The entryway smelled of cedar and something sweet like spiced tea. A thick rug lay on the floor, woven with patterns that reminded Mira of leaves drifting in water. To one side stood a wooden bench with a folded blanket, and above it hung a rack where cloaks and scarves rested. The air inside the inn was neither too hot nor too cool. It was the perfect middle place, the kind of warmth that makes your bones feel remembered. Beyond the entryway, the inn opened into a common room. It was lit by lanterns and a small hearth, where a fire glowed with gentle patience. The flames did not leap or crackle loudly. They simply moved, slow and soothing, as if they understood the purpose of this place. A long wooden table stood near the hearth, set with a teapot and cups that looked handmade. Along the walls were shelves filled with jars of herbs, bundles of dried flowers, and small objects that caught the light, polished stones, little glass bottles, carved wooden charms shaped like birds. There were no other guests visible, but the room did not feel lonely. It felt held. Petals drifted inside too. They moved through the air in unhurried spirals, sometimes settling on the windowsill, sometimes catching briefly in the edge of a curtain. A few lay near the hearth, not burning, simply resting there, as though the fire would never harm them. Mira removed her cloak and hung it on the rack. The woman watched with a calm smile. "I'm called Elowen," she said. "This is my inn." Mira gave her name in return, and as she spoke it, she felt as if the name was being received kindly, like a cup being taken with both hands. Elowen set the candle down and gestured toward the hearth. "Sit," she said. "Warm yourself. There's tea and a bowl of soup that has been waiting." Mira sat in a chair near the fire. It was cushioned, not with something soft that swallowed you, but with something firm enough to support, to let you fully rest. She held her hands out toward the warmth of the hearth and watched the fire glow. Elowen moved with quiet ease, pouring tea into a cup and placing it on the table beside Mira. The tea smelled of chamomile and something floral, like petals steeped in sunlight. She then brought a small bowl of soup, steam curling upward in lazy ribbons, and set it down with a spoon. Mira took a sip of tea first. It tasted like softness, like a warm afternoon, like the moment before sleep when your body finally believes it can let go. She ate the soup slowly. It was simple and nourishing, with vegetables and herbs that tasted of garden earth and careful hands. Each spoonful seemed to smooth something inside her, as if the food was not only filling her stomach but soothing the small tensions she hadn't even noticed. As she ate, Mira's gaze wandered around the room. She noticed how the lantern light made gentle halos on the walls. She noticed the way the curtains moved slightly, though no wind seemed to enter. She noticed the petals, always the petals, floating and settling and drifting again, never hurried, never chaotic. "What are they?" Mira asked softly, nodding toward a petal that had landed on the table near her cup. Elowen glanced at it, her eyes shining with quiet fondness. "They're invitations," she said, "and reminders, and sometimes they're simply themselves. This inn is a place that likes to be found, but only by those who arrive with quiet hearts. The petals help guide them. They also keep the air gentle. Mira touched the petal. It felt cool beneath her fingertip, like silk that had been kissed by night. "Do they come from a tree?" she asked. Alowan's smile deepened. "Not exactly," she said. "Or perhaps they come from every tree that has ever bloomed in the mind of someone who needed comfort. This valley remembers softness. The inn does too." Mira sat back in her chair. The tea warmed her throat. The fire warmed her cheeks. The long day began to fade behind her like a landscape slipping away as you close a door. Alowan sat across from her, not in a way that demanded conversation, but in a way that offered company if needed. For a while they were quiet, listening to the stream outside and the occasional settling sound of wood in the hearth. Then Alowan spoke again. "There are rooms upstairs," she said, "each one made for rest. But before you sleep, there's something you might like to see if you feel like it. It's gentle. Nothing you must do. Simply something the inn offers." Mira looked at her, curiosity stirring but softly, like a cat stretching. "What is it?" she asked. Alowan stood, smoothing her hands over her apron as if brushing away invisible flour. "The petal room," she said. "Not everyone notices it, not everyone needs it, but those who do often sleep as though they've been rocked by the world itself." Mira felt her eyelids grow heavier, but the thought of something meant for deeper rest was like the promise of an even softer pillow. "I'd like to see it," she murmured. Alowan nodded and lifted her candle again. Together they crossed the common room, their footsteps muted by rugs that seemed to drink sound. Alowan opened a door in the corner, and behind it was a staircase that curled upward, each step worn smooth by time and kindness. They climbed slowly. The air upstairs was cooler, scented with lavender and clean linen. The walls were lined with framed paintings, each one depicting something calm: a moonlit meadow, a bowl of pears on a table, a sleeping cat beside a window. The lantern light made the paintings seem almost alive, as though the scenes could continue quietly beyond their frames. At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched, with several doors along it. Alowan led Mira to a door near the end, one that looked no different from the others, except for a small carved design near the handle. A swirl of petals, carved so delicately that it seemed to flutter even in stillness. Alowan opened the door. Dawn. The floor was covered with a thick dawn. The floor was covered with a thick woven rug that felt like moss underfoot. A bed stood against one wall, dressed in layers of linen and quilts, the sheets pale and inviting. But it was the petals that filled the room, and they did not simply drift here and there. They floated everywhere. Some brushed the bed covers, some circled. Some brushed the bed covers, some circled the chair near the window. Some gathered in soft heaps on the floor, like the remains of a dream. Mira stepped inside, and the petals seemed to greet her, swirling around her shoulders, without touching, like a warm breeze that knows how to keep respectful distance. She felt a strange, pleasant sensation in her chest, as if the air here was lighter and kinder than anywhere else. Elowen stood in the doorway, candle held steady. "This room listens," she said quietly, "not to words, but to the deeper things. Tension, worry, the small knots that form in the body when the mind has carried too much. The petals, they help loosen those knots." Mira looked around, letting the room wash over her. The window was slightly open and the stream's sound entered like a lullaby. Beyond the window, darkness rested on the valley, and the stars looked close enough to touch. "How does it work?" Mira asked, but her voice was already softer, already slower. Elowen stepped into the room and walked to the lantern, adjusting it slightly so the light became even gentler. "It doesn't work the way busy things work," she said. "There's nothing to figure out, nothing to fix. The petals do what petals do. They fall, they drift, they rest. They remind the body how to follow." Mira swallowed, feeling the truth of that settle in her bones. Elowen gestured toward a small chair near the bed. "Sit for a moment," she said, "or lie down if you prefer. Let your body decide." Mira sat in the chair, her hands resting in her lap. A petal drifted near her fingers, hovering as if curious. She watched it, her eyes following its slow spiral. It moved without urgency, without effort, and something inside Mira began to mimic it. Elowen spoke again, her voice like a low song. "Long ago," she said, "before anyone built this inn, the valley was simply a valley. It held streams and stones and wildflowers, and it held a kind of quiet that some people missed, even without knowing they missed it. Travelers would pass through and feel their shoulders drop without understanding why. They would breathe deeper. They would linger even if they didn't know what they were lingering for." Mira's gaze grew hazier, but she listened, letting the story carry her without needing to hold it. "In those days," Elowen continued, "there was a grove of trees near where the inn now stands. Trees that bloomed with pale flowers when the air was still cool from winter. Their petals were soft and abundant. When the wind moved through the grove, petals would rain down, covering the ground in a quiet, shimmering blanket. People who walked through would come out the other side with petals in their hair and on their shoulders, and they would laugh softly as if they'd been blessed by something gentle." Elowen paused, as if listening for the valley's approval. "One evening," she said, "a traveler arrived in that grove, someone whose heart was heavy with worry, someone who had carried too many days of noise. They sat beneath the blooming branches and closed their eyes, and as the petals fell around them, they felt their breathing slow, their hands unclenched. Their mind, tired of holding sharp thoughts, began to soften. The petals in the room seemed to drift more slowly, as if echoing Elowen's words. "That traveler wished," Elowen said, "for a place like that grove to always exist. A place that could be found by anyone who needed it. A place that would not demand anything, only offer rest. And the valley, which has always been kind, listened. Valleys listen, you know. Streams listen, even stones listen in their slow way. Mira's eyelids fluttered. She felt as though she were sinking into the chair, not in a collapsing way, but in the way a leaf settles onto water and is carried. The next night, Elawan continued, a small shelter appeared near the grove. Not built by hands exactly, but formed by intention and quiet magic. It was little more than a roof and walls and a hearth, but it was warm and it smelled of cedar. The petals drifted through it, as though the grove had agreed to share its blessing. Elawan's eyes, in the lantern light, looked like they held starlight. Over time, she said, the shelter became an inn. It grew slowly, as all gentle things do. It learned where to place windows so the moon would fall on the floor in the most comforting way. It learned what herbs to keep in jars. It learned how to make tea that tastes like calm. And it learned how to call to those who needed it, not loudly, not with signs and announcements, but with petals. Mira's breath was deep and even now. The story flowed over her like warm water, and she did not need to think about it, only feel it. Elawan stepped closer and placed a hand lightly on the back of the chair, a steady presence. This room, she said, is part of that learning. The inn noticed that rest isn't only about a bed, it's about permission. The petals are permission made visible. They drift, they settle, they do not hurry, they do not grip. They let go. A petal brushed Mira's cheek, so light she almost didn't feel it, but the sensation was like a tiny kiss of cool silk. She smiled faintly without meaning to. Elawan chuckled softly, as if pleased. The petals like you, she murmured, or perhaps they simply recognize the kind of tired you carry. Not the tired of fear, but the tired of being awake for too long. Mira's shoulders released another layer of tension. Her hands, resting in her lap, felt heavy and warm. The room's air seemed to cradle her, holding her in a quiet embrace. Elawan moved toward the bed and pulled back the quilt slightly, revealing smooth sheets beneath. She fluffed a pillow with gentle hands, making it look like a cloud that had decided to stay. You can sleep here, she said, or if you'd rather, there's a room without petals, quieter in a different way. But many travelers find the petals comforting. Mira stood slowly, her movements unhurried. She walked to the bed and sat on its edge. The mattress accepted her weight like it had been waiting. The petals drifted around her, some settling near her knees on the quilt, some hovering near her shoulders. She lay down. As soon as her head touched the pillow, she felt a deep, immediate relief, as though her thoughts had been carrying a bundle that she could finally set down. The pillow smelled faintly of lavender and linen dried in sun. The quilt was warm, not heavy, a balanced warmth that made her feel safe without trapping her. Elawan stood beside the bed, candlelight soft on her face. "Close your eyes," she said quietly, though Mira's eyes were already closing. Let the room do what it does. Mira's eyes closed fully. The darkness behind her eyelids was soft, not empty. She heard the stream's steady murmur through the window. She heard the faint whisper of petals brushing fabric as they settled. She heard, somewhere below, the hearth's quiet breath. Alawan's voice continued, gentle as sleep itself. Sometimes, she said, the petals bring small dreams. Not sharp dreams, not urgent ones. Dreams that feel like walking through a garden at night with lanterns hidden among leaves. Dreams that smell of flowers and damp earth. Dreams that remind the mind how to wander without worry. Mira's mind drifted, and in that drifting she began to dream. Poured into them. Flowers bloomed, poured into them. Flowers bloomed everywhere, not only in beds, but in unexpected places, between steps, in the cracks of walls, along the edges of fountains. Their petals were pale, almost luminous, and they moved slightly, as if breathing. Lanterns hung from branches and arches, their light warm and steady. The air was filled with the scent of blossoms, and beneath it was the grounding smell of soil, rich and alive. Mira walked slowly, her feet bare now, feeling the cool stone beneath her. As she moved, petals drifted down around her, but in the dream they seemed to carry tiny murmurs, like soft words spoken in a language made of wind. She didn't need to understand. She simply felt the meaning. You are safe. You are held. You can rest. She came to a small pond in the center of the garden. The water was still, reflecting the stars. On the pond floated petals, forming gentle patterns that shifted slowly like a calm breath made visible. Mira knelt by the pond and looked into the water. Instead of seeing her own face, she saw a softer version of herself, not younger, not older, but unburdened. The reflection smiled at her, and Mira felt her chest loosen even more, as if she were being reminded of something she had forgotten, that she did not have to carry everything all the time. She reached into the pond and lifted a single petal from the water's surface. It was cool and smooth. As she held it, the petal began to glow faintly, and in that glow she saw small scenes, like tiny paintings. A quiet room with a fire, a cup of tea steaming in a hand, a window open to night air, a bed, waiting. The scenes were not instructions, they were offerings. Mira let the petal float away. It returned to the pond with barely a ripple, fell on her hair, her shoulders, her skin, her skin. The petals fell on her hair, her shoulders, her skin, but they did not cling. They simply touched and then lifted away again like gentle reassurance. At the far end of the garden, she found a door. It stood alone in a hedge carved of dark wood with a handle shaped like a leaf. Around the base of the door lay a thick carpet of petals, piled as though many dreams had passed through here and left their softness behind. Mira reached for the handle and opened the door. On the other side was not another room, but a quiet corridor of air, like a hallway made of night mist. The corridor stretched ahead, and along its edges floated petals, guiding the way. The petals glowed faintly, and their light was soothing. like the glow of embers after a fire is settled. Mira stepped through. As she walked, she felt the corridor gently washing something away from her. Not memories, not important things, but the sharpness of the day, the tightness of worry, the lingering buzz of thoughts that had been too loud. With each step, she felt more and more like she was sinking into something calm. The corridor led her to another door, this one made of pale wood, almost white, with a small carved design of a sleeping bird. She opened it. Behind it was the inn again, but quieter, as if seen through a veil. The common room was empty, the hearth glowing low. The lanterns were dimmer. The petals drifted through the air in slow spirals. Everything looked softened, as though the world itself had exhaled. Mira walked through the common room and up the stairs, feeling no weight in her body at all, only ease. She returned to the petal room and saw herself sleeping in the bed, her face relaxed, her breath deep. The sight was comforting, like seeing a friend finally resting. Mira, the dream walker, stepped closer to the bed and watched the petals. They were moving like breath, rising and falling, gathering and dispersing. Each motion was unhurried, as if time had no need to push. The petals seemed to carry a quiet message, not in words, but in feeling. This is how you can be too. Light, unclenched, allowed to drift, dream. Mira leaned down as if to whisper something to the sleeping Mira, but instead of words, she placed a petal gently on the sleeper's forehead. The petal dissolved into warmth, and the sleeping Mira sighed, a long, soft exhale that seemed to empty her of everything unnecessary. The dream began to fade, not abruptly, but like lantern light, dimming as you close your eyes. The garden softened. The corridor of mist softened. The doors became less distinct. All that remained was the sensation of petals drifting and the deep, steady comfort of being in a place that knew how to hold someone. In the real petal room, Elowen stood quietly beside the bed for a moment longer, watching Mira's breathing. It was slow and even, the way it becomes when the body trusts the night. Elowen reached out and adjusted the quilt slightly, tucking it around Mira's shoulders with the smallest movement, careful not to disturb. A few petals settled on the quilt, shimmering faintly in the lantern light. She lowered the lantern flame until the room became dimmer. The light now only a soft glow, enough to make everything feel safe, but not enough to pull anyone toward wakefulness. Elowen walked to the window and closed it a little, leaving it open just enough for the stream's lullaby to continue. The air that came in was cool and sweet, scented with grass and distant flowers. Then she turned toward the door, her steps quiet on the rug. Before leaving, she paused and looked back at Mira, asleep among drifting petals. "Rest," she whispered, not as a command, but as a blessing. She stepped out and closed the door with a soft click that sounded like a petal landing. the inn settled into deeper quiet. Downstairs, the fire glowed low, a warm heart in the building's chest. The jars of herbs on the shelves seemed to breathe their gentle scents into the air. The lanterns hummed faintly with their steady light. Outside, the stream continued its unhurried wandering, carrying moonlight on its surface. The valley held everything in its calm embrace. And in the petal room, Mira slept. The petals continued to drift. They rose and fell in slow patterns like the rhythm of breathing. Some gathered near the bed and then lifted away again. Some settled on the floor in soft piles. Some hovered near the ceiling, turning lazily in the dim light. Mira's dreams moved gently now, no longer clear scenes, but soft impressions. The feeling of walking barefoot on cool stone, the scent of blossoms, the warmth of tea, the steady glow of lanterns. Her body sank deeper into the mattress, her face smoothed, her hands relaxed, fingers uncurling completely. Outside the inn, the petals that guided travelers continued to drift along the path by the stream, though there were no footsteps tonight. They simply moved with the night air, marking the way not as an urgent direction, but as a quiet suggestion. If you need rest, you can find it. The inn itself seemed to breathe, wood settling, fire sighing, linen resting, petals floating, everything slow, everything calm. Now the story begins to soften even more, like a blanket pulled gently up to your chin. The images can fade, the details can blur. You don't have to hold on to anything. Imagine the petal room growing dimmer, the lantern light becoming a warm hush. Imagine the petals drifting more slowly, as if they are falling asleep too. Imagine the stream outside smoothing into a single steady sound, like a lullaby with no beginning and no end. Mira sleeps deeply, safely, quietly, her breath a gentle tide, and you can follow that tide. Inhale, slow and easy. Exhale, long and soft. Let your shoulders become heavy. Let your forehead smooth. Let your tongue rest in your mouth. Let your hands loosen, your fingers warm and still. If thoughts arrive, let them be like petals, drifting in, drifting out, never needing to stay. The secret inn holds its warmth. The valley holds its quiet. The night holds its calm. And you are allowed to rest, allowed to drift, allowed to sink into sleep as gently as a petal settling onto a quilt. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.